Good evening. My name is Ezel Lundy. I'm a concerned father whose son attends Sophie B. Wright High School in New Orleans, Louisiana, where he is being socially promoted to his long-term educational detriment. If you received this email from me, then you see a list of all my concerns. I want to take the time to read out these concerns so that you can put a face to a father's anguish. On October the 24th, 2019, Tuesday afternoon, beginning at 5:30 p.m., I drove 21 hours straight from my home in Washington, D.C. to New Orleans to challenge the social promotion of my son that is being conducted by Sophie B. Wright High School's principal, Sharon Clark, some of their teachers, and the school board comprised of James Watson, Reginald DeLicia, Alvin Porter, Terry Hunter, and Shannon Holtzman. The latter two recently resigned from the board this past summer, but they have been complicit over the past 2 years in being silent as my son has been neglected educationally. My son earned a 1.78 GPA at the end of his 8th grade year. This was 2016-2017 school year. He was allowed to remain in the band despite not meeting the 2.5 GPA requirement. Both Principal Clark and the Sophie B. Wright Board violated school policy by allowing my son to place an extracurricular activity ahead of his education. Principal Clark and the Sophie B. Wright Board justified this academic malpractice by claiming that my son's emotional well-being is important, and it is. They consider an extracurricular activity one source of emotional health. I argued and continue to argue that academic competence is a more important source of lasting emotional health. A rigorous education provides that. I strongly believe that requiring my son to demonstrate competency in his coursework first, in other words, meeting the GPA requirement, will lead to a better student who can return to an extracurricular activity with renewed pride. At the end of the fall semester, 2017-2018 school year, my son's GPA dropped to a 1.71. He was neither removed from his extracurricular activity nor placed on probation, which is required by school policy. My son had a C average in 8th grade English, yet he was enrolled in Honors English 1, 2007-2018 school year, which was his freshman year. My son earned a D in Honors English 1, yet he was enrolled in Honors English 2 the following school year. In Honors English 2, 2018-2019 school year, my son was allowed to submit handwritten assignments instead of typed assignments, as would be expected in an honors class. Again, he was a sophomore submitting handwritten assignments in an honors class. The teacher complained that my son was not submitting homework, and yet his final grade was a mercy D. My son had a standing grade of F in Algebra 1 prior to a parent-principal meeting on April 17, 2018. This was his 2017-2018 school year. Within a week after that meeting, my son's final grade for 5th term skyrocketed to a B. Again, from an F to a B within a week. My son had not submitted homework in Algebra 1 for more than a week, as told to me by the instructor in the class. And this was a common complaint throughout my son's tenure at Sophie B. Wright from many teachers, that he was just simply not doing his work and not making an effort. Yet my son was allowed to remain in his extracurricular activity. My son had a C average in a class titled Journey to Careers during the same time period as the Algebra 1 class. He had never earned any grade higher than a C prior to the April 17, 2018 parent-principal meeting. After that meeting, my son's final grade for the term was also increased to a B. My request to see graded work that showed the significant improvement from an F to a B, specifically in Algebra 1, was ignored by Principal Clark, the teacher, and the Sophie B. Wright Board, who were always copied on major emails. And this is in violation of the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which requires that educational documents be provided to custodial parents in a timely manner. And this was a common theme where I would request documents and Principal Clark would slow walk the documents to me, leading to frustration and making it almost impossible to get a real-time understanding of what's happening with my son. After my son received these bogus B's, his GPA improved from a 1.71 to a 2.5. The GPA required to remain in an extracurricular activity at Sophie B. Wright. In the fall of 2018, this was 2018-2019 school year, I was told by my son's environmental science teacher that my son had not turned in 17 assignments. Nonetheless, my son was given a D for each of the 17 missing assignments. And the teacher explained that this was done to prevent my son from falling too far behind that he would not be able to catch up. While I understood the teacher's well-meaning actions, I asked that he not give my son any grades that were not earned, and that doing so was causing more harm than good. My son was learning, unfortunately, that being a good kid and just being an overall sweet kid was enough to charm his way through school, and I did not want him to learn that terrible lesson. Within a few weeks of this specific communication with the environmental science teacher, this was again the fall of 2018, all communication from my son's teachers and school staff members stopped. I was told that I could only communicate through Principal Clark going forward. My son was enrolled in intermediate band during his freshman year, 2017-2018, where he earned an A. My son was re-enrolled in intermediate band during his sophomore year, 2018-2019, where he also earned an A. And as of September 23, 2019, my son is a 4-year veteran of the band and clarinet section leader, yet he is enrolled in beginning band. I've complained vigorously about this placement in a gut class at the expense of my son's academic growth. As a point of clarification, I generally support my son being in the band. I encourage him to practice 30 minutes per day when he lives with my wife, his stepmother, and me in Washington, D.C. during the summers, holidays, and spring breaks. Being a band member at St. Augustine High School from 1985 to 1988, I personally know the value of band membership. My argument is that my son must earn the privilege of being in any extracurricular activity. Sophie B. Wright's extracurricular handbook supports my argument. Unfortunately, neither the principal nor the board are holding my son to the standards outlined in the handbook, and this is causing him irreparable harm. Currently, my son has 3 Fs, a D, and a C, yet he's allowed to spend valuable time in an extracurricular activity instead of dedicating it to improving his competency in core subjects. In the past, I made similar complaints about Principal Clark's malpractice to Olin Parker and Lori Hawkins of the Recovery School District. Mr. Parker defended his inactivity by claiming that Sophie B. Wright and their board make final decisions regarding school policy. Mr. Parker did not suggest what is to be done when the principal and the board violate their own school policy. Once Sophie B. Wright transferred over to Orleans Parish School District, I reached out to those who provided oversight in that body. I've reached out to Orleans Parish School Board's Office of Charter School Compliance, led by Dr. Kelly Peterson. Dr. Peterson is also ignoring her responsibility to oversee a charter school that is violating its policies to the detriment of a student's education. An audit of all extracurricular activities at Sophie B. Wright will reveal that many students are allowed to participate in extracurricular activities despite not meeting the GPA requirement. A Sophie B. Wright teacher informed me that there are students doing far worse than my son, and yet they are being allowed to participate in extracurricular activities. With a 6% college readiness index, as reported by U.S. News and World Report, Sophie B. Wright is continuing this tragedy of undereducating students while letting them participate in extracurricular activities. Just to give you perspective, while Sophie B. Wright has a 6% college readiness index, Benjamin Franklin has an 85% college readiness index. Dr. Peterson of the Charter School Compliance Office stated that I must bring my concerns to the Sophie B. Wright School Board, who are ultimately responsible for oversight of Sophie B. Wright's policies. Yet for the past 2 years, the board's only response has been, "We support Principal Sharon Clark." They have never responded to my specific complaints about school policy not being followed at the expense of my son's academic growth. And finally, regarding the meeting on September 25th, 2019, for which I drove 21 hours straight, there was no reaction to my son's appalling grades. The board members who were present, James Watson and Reginald DeLicia, never asked one question during the hour-long meeting regarding why my son has 3 Fs, 1 D, and 1 C, yet remains in an extracurricular activity. That is the oversight in which Dr. Peterson is requiring that I seek to help my son. So I'm imploring anyone who watches this video to provide me some guidance as to where I should go next, because there is no assistance with Sophie B. Wright High School, with Sophie B. Wright Board, or with Orleans Parish School Board. My name is Ezell Lundy, and I am a very concerned parent. I thank you for any assistance you can provide.